Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365 and National Hog Farmer. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Joining us today to talk about the value of biogas production, specifically in the U.S. pork industry, but we'll talk more in general as well, is Patrick Serfass, Executive Director of the American Biogas Council. Welcome, Patrick. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks, Sarah. Good to be here.
So for those of you joining us online, we thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions for our guests, feel free to post those there in the chat area to the right of your screen. If you're joining us from social media, simply post those questions directly in those channels. So Patrick, let's start with a general overview of the biogas market, what it's looking like, what we're seeing from a growth perspective. Just kind of fill us in, if you would, to get things started.
Sure. So a biogas system takes organic material like manure or food waste or the sludge that comes out of a wastewater plant and digests it with microbes. So it's like a stomach, like a big tank that you engineer as a stomach. And as those microbes eat up the organic material, they burp out biogas, which is a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide. And we have currently 2,300 of these systems that are operational across the country. About 1,000 of them are at wastewater plants, and about a little over 500 of them are on farms, and the balance are food waste projects and landfills. And that's a large number of systems. It means that there's biogas systems in all 50 states, but there could be 15,000 new systems built, and that's just because of all the organic material that we have in the country, and especially manure from dairy farms and swine farms and poultry farms. You know, there are thousands of farms that are producing enough manure or handling enough manure to economically build a biogas project and have not. And that is the opportunity in the industry right now.
Generally, when we're talking on-farm biogas units, we're talking dairy. I think it's just kind of where things maybe initially got started, but there's a lot of opportunity on the hog side as well, and that's what we want to talk about today. Where do you see the opportunities there when it comes to the hog sector and biogas production?
Um, it really ends up being it's just trying to get economies of scale. So you're trying to find the largest concentrations of manure. And that's a good thing environmentally and economically. So where you have the largest volumes of manure, you have the largest um, volumes of methane emissions that are environmental concern, but you probably also have the largest costs for having to need to manage all that manure as well. And so, you know, right now, out of those 500 systems or so that are on farms, about 90% of those are on dairies, and about 9 to 10% of them are on swine farms. And really, what you're looking for is about 5,000 head and above. And that could be on a single farm, or that could be a cluster of farms. And that's kind of one of the big changes that's happened in the last 5 years, is moving from single farm systems to clusters of farms all working together in some ways to be able to get economies of scale. You're producing more biogas, that means more revenue that you can sell, and obviously a lower carbon footprint for your farming as well, which, depending upon who you're selling to, that's often really important and becoming more and more important today.
So when you talk about these clusters, how close do these farms need to be in order to form a cluster? And does it can it be a mix of dairy and pork? I mean, or does it all need to be dairy, all need to be a hog farm? Talk to us a little more about those clusters.
So, Smithfield's obviously the big cheese. I don't know. It's interesting to use a dairy analogy, I guess, for the swine industry. They're the big company that's buying and owns a lot of the animals, right? So, one of the models that they have is they'll get together like 15, 30, or even 40 farms to all work together. And what they try to do is, and they could be like, anywhere from 1 to 15 miles apart. It kind of depends. If you go really far, you want to be a larger cluster. And if you're not going as far, then your cluster of farms can be smaller. And their business model, which others are using as well, is let's cover all the manure pits on the farms. And so you have the digester, that's the biogas system. It's already producing methane, but now you're just covering it and trapping all that methane so you can collect it and use it. Let's put those biogas systems or those covers on each of the farms, and then let's take the gas and pipe the raw biogas. So it's not ready to go into a natural gas pipeline yet because biogas is a mixture of carbon dioxide and methane. And in your natural gas pipelines, it's pure methane. So you have to make the methane pure to be able to put it into the pipeline. That's really where you can sell it. And so they are piping all the raw biogas into one gas upgrading system. And so you've got basically a gas pipeline, a private pipeline coming from each of these farms to one central unit. And then that upgrades the gas in a large volume because it's coming from, maybe a couple dozen farms, and then putting it into the pipeline. When that happens economically, the model is usually that the farmer pays for everything to produce the biogas. So if you're covering a lagoon, or if you're building a tank style digester, it's a little bit less common for swine farms. Usually for swine farms, we're talking about covered lagoons. The farmer usually covers all of that capital cost, but then gets a long-term offtake for the gas that gives you a good ROI for that return on investment from that for that farmer. And then Smithfield or whoever the company is that's buying the gas, they'll cover all the gas upgrading capital costs and selling the gas and dealing with all of that. And what are often variable markets, that is usually not on the farmer's end. So you kind of have this partnership that gets developed. And that happens at the single farm unit as well, like at that level as well. But it's happening a lot more commonly in the clusters. And the reason is just kind of obvious, where if you can just, your economies of scale are so much greater. And why instead of building one project, why not build 30?
So do you have an estimate? You talked ROI. Do you have an estimate on what that might be for an individual hog producer, or any kind of just a general frame for that?
Um, no, I mean, that's probably not something that I should speak to, but I can tell you that what the developers are doing is trying to meet the farmers where the farmers' expectations are. And a lot of farmers' expectations are like 3 to 5 years ROI or less. So a lot of developers on the biogas side are trying to meet those expectations. That's why you're trying to see these clusters and lots of projects being built at one to try to shrink those ROIs. I mean, there are projects, certainly municipal projects too in the biogas industry outside of the swine sector with ROIs that are like 5 to 10 years. But the municipal appetite for a return is very different because their risk tolerance is much different. And so it's all over the place. But I would say probably a range of 3 to 5 years is going to be on the common, maybe the lower end of the common return that you're seeing these days.
So why is it important for hog producers to consider renewable energy production? I mean, is it really beneficial to their operation? Is it just another revenue source, or are there some other advantages as well?
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of things that all happen together. And as I was explaining to someone yesterday, you're taking a kind of problems and costs, and you're converting those into solutions and revenue. And who doesn't want that? Now it can be complex because it has to be integrated with your farm operation. This isn't like you buy a solar panel and you stick it on a field some way and you hook it up and you set it and you forget it. This is not that, right? These biogas systems are living systems. You're trying to make sure that the microbes that are doing all the work of creating the biogas, that they stay happy, and that means that they need to stay warm. And so if you're in a northern climate, you're going to need to consider whether you add heating to your lagoon or not. And depending upon how deep your lagoons are, you might want to consider mixing. And all those things are going to optimize your biogas production, but they're going to add capital costs. And some people are going to say, you know what, I'm happy with less biogas production. I just want to have an ambient temperature, no mixing lagoon, just cover it. And okay, yes, I'm going to produce a lot less biogas in the winter, but I'm okay with that. And others are going to say, yeah, I want to produce all the biogas that I can, and I want to put in that heating or that mixing to be able to do that. So you're seeing different approaches to this, and it largely depends on climate. And you're knocking in terms of the benefits you're getting. You're definitely getting an additional revenue stream. You're usually, because you're covering those manure pits, you're generally knocking down odor, which for neighbors can
Mhm.
be a big deal. And not just in terms of keeping your neighbors happy, which most farmers want to do, but if you want to expand your herd size, you might have less backlash if your operation didn't have as much odor coming from it. And then, depending upon whether you use heating or not, you might be knocking down pathogens in the process, which is really important for animal health and health of all kinds. And then your digested material, so that manure, which you might otherwise be spreading on fields as a natural fertilizer, now that it's been digested, it's going to be more plant available. And so there have been some studies that show that crop yields can be 10 to 30 times greater using digested material compared to synthetic fertilizers or manures. And that's just because the bugs have done a lot of the work to break apart the compounds in those nutrients to create nutrients that are ready to be absorbed by the plants. It's a natural process that's just been accelerated. And that doesn't happen with raw manure, and that doesn't exist with synthetic fertilizers. So there's a bunch of different ways that the system will integrate with the farm. And so as long as the farmer is interested in that complexity and that integration, well, then you've got a bunch of benefits that you can all line up. And that's why some folks think that it's really worth it and wonder why they didn't do it sooner.
You could probably also integrate other renewable energy systems into a biogas system, right? I mean, you could integrate some solar into that to help with your offset electrical costs, or are there farms that do that? Does that even make sense?
Yeah, there definitely are renewable energy systems that are also built on farms. There's rarely an integration, though. The only time that would work out is if you are trying to get if you're selling your gas into a particular market that really values what the carbon intensity of that gas is. And we do have some markets that really value that. If you happen to be selling into a market that values the carbon intensity of your gas, and you are using any kind of electricity, for example, to move your manure
Mhm.
around, or more importantly, if your gas upgrading system is on your farm, if you're not using that hub and spoke cluster model like we were talking about earlier, where you have one gas upgrading system that might be miles away, if your gas upgrading system is on your farm, that uses energy. And depending upon what the emission profile of the energy that you need to run that gas upgrading unit, if you use renewable energy, that lowers your carbon footprint for your gas. And that allows you to not just sell the gas molecule, but to sell carbon credits on top of it. And that ends up being an additional revenue source. So it's an additional complexity. It doesn't usually happen with the cluster model, because on the cluster model, it's usually the Smithfield or whoever else that is taking on that complexity, and that is off farm. But
Mhm.
if you are a farmer that is building your system and selling your gas directly, if it's kind of a one-off project, then yes, incorporating renewable energy or something like that could be very beneficial.
How best for a producer who might be interested to get some more information to kind of look at the technical expertise of, of someone that can tell them, hey, this will work on your farm or not. Where would they turn?
I'd probably send them to us. So I would go to AmericanBiogasCouncil.org. And on there, you're going to see a list of members. We have 400 companies that are members of the American Biogas Council. About 100 of those companies are developers that might be interested in developing a project. And you're going to be able to see that list of project developers there and start contacting them. Or you can reach out to us as staff, and we're happy to help put you in touch with those people as well. There's a lot of people who are hungry to develop biogas projects because there is so much potential. We've only built out 20% of the market, and there's just so much organic material out there that is an opportunity to create jobs, create revenue, but also capture and decrease emissions, greenhouse gas emissions at the same time, and provide other benefits to the farm, like knocking down odor and making a better fertilizer for your crops and stuff like that. But it takes making that connection between the farmer and the developer to see what kind of a system makes the most economic sense for that farm. Every project, this is the blessing, the curse of the biogas projects. Every project is different. And while that means that, there's going to be almost no cookie cutter approach from one farm to another, there are going to be a lot of similarities. And the blessing of that is that your project, whatever ends up getting developed, is going to be tailor made for your farm to make sure that it really integrates in the best possible way and that it's creating the products that you need locally. You're basically trying to take in all your local inputs, your feedstocks. Maybe you're even adding food waste. Maybe there's a food processor nearby and they're adding their food waste to your biogas system too. Whatever's available locally as your input, and then figuring out, okay, what products do I need to sell on my output locally, and that creates its own fingerprint for your biogas system.
Very good. Any final thoughts, key takeaways you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Talk to your friends, and I think that there's a very fast growing number of farms that are building biogas systems now, and talk to them about what their experience is. I think you'll largely find that it's been pretty positive. We need more of these things for rural communities, and we need it for the environment, and we need to be helping to inject new revenue into our rural areas. And with that, everyone will benefit, our food systems and our local communities.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time and your insight today, Patrick. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Nice to be with you. Thank you.
Likewise, we appreciate all of you for tuning in. Until next time, for Feedstuffs and National Hog Farmer, I'm Sarah Muirhead.